Courtney, I want to turn to you because Kier's talking about the U.S. shift in its posture towards Russia. That is a change, but you've got new reporting on how the U.S. intelligence community is assessing Putin's motivations. Basically, the more things change, the more they might also stay the same.
Yeah, that's right, Ali. And it's not just U.S. intelligence, but a number of U.S. allies all have come to the same conclusion here. And that is that Vladimir Putin's goals that he stated even before the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, that he wants to take all of Ukraine, those goals have not changed, Ali. In fact, according to a number of various intelligence sources, again, United States and other allies, Vladimir Putin still wants to take all of Ukraine. And because of that reason, there was a lot of skepticism about his actual willingness to come to the table and make a real peace deal with Ukraine right now. Now, there is a belief that he could agree to some sort of a ceasefire, and that is because he realizes, according to these sources, he realizes that his forces need to reset and reform. They could actually use the break from this grind of fighting that they have faced for the last nearly 3 years now. But with that said, the belief among these intelligence sources is that Vladimir Putin still wants all of Ukraine, and he has not changed from his ultimate goals from that. He also, according to these officials, believes that he can wait out Ukraine and wait out Europe, and that he also believes that he still is winning. Despite what's happening on the ground there, which really is, in many cases, still a stalemate, these officials say that Vladimir Putin believes that either he's winning or he's not losing as badly as Ukraine is losing here, Ali. So we're looking today at day number 1 of this beginning of this dialogue between the United States and Russia, with hope towards maybe some sort of ultimate peace deal with Ukraine. But the reality is the intelligence just doesn't show that Vladimir Putin is looking for a long-term peace deal with Ukraine right now, Ali.
Court, it's critical context to these negotiations, or at least this phase we're in of talking about talking. Thank you. Ned, turning to you, it sounds like the U.S. intelligence that Court is talking about has come to the same conclusion as Ukrainian President Zelensky, who's been telling anyone who will listen, Putin doesn't want peace. He still aspires to control all of Ukraine. So is it a mistake, given that reporting and given what Zelensky has said, for the Trump administration to continue establishing closer ties to Russia?
Well, Ali, I, of course, couldn't speak to intelligence, but what I can tell you is that over the course of 3+ years of this brutal war of aggression that President Putin has waged against Ukraine, we in the Biden administration never saw any indication that he was ready and willing to come to the negotiating table in a real, genuine, and constructive way. Quite the opposite. I think the idea that Putin may be looking for nothing more than an opportunity to rest, to refit, and ultimately to refight on the battlefield is probably sound. There is reason to believe that is the case. Look, to state the obvious, there are very few similarities between the approach that the Biden administration administered in trying to bring an end to this conflict and the approach that the Trump administration is displaying right now. But there is one, at least rhetorically, and that's the emphasis on a just and durable peace. And by just peace, we mean a peace that makes a very clear distinction between victim and aggressor, a peace that makes very clear that Ukraine is the country that it's been aggressed upon, that Russia is the aggressor, and that the aggressor must pay a price. Even the Trump administration, despite its very different and I think profoundly unwise approach, has also said they seek a just peace. But it's hard to see this coming towards a just peace when the Ukrainians are not at the table, when the Europeans are not at the table, and when we're dealing solely with the Russians, essentially speaking over the heads of the Ukrainians and making decisions on their behalf. During the Biden administration, we consistently made the point that if Russia were to stop fighting today, the war would come to an end. If Ukraine were to stop fighting, Ukraine would come to an end. Those are the stakes of this conflict, Ali, and I'm concerned that the Trump administration is not pursuing this in a way that would lead to what they say they want, a just peace.
And that's certainly a concern that others have shared, including here on this show with me. But you talk about the differences between the administration that you served in and the administration currently, because the U.S. and allies have spent the last 3 years trying to isolate Russia. But now, in the span of a few weeks, American policy appears to have done a complete 180. As a diplomat, you know the State Department. How do you deal with that kind of whiplash, especially in addressing the deeper concern that our allies in Europe have right now?
Well, I can tell you, Ali, some of the foremost experts on both Russia, Ukraine, Europe, geopolitics sit at the State Department. And Secretary Rubio and Steve Witkoff and the National Security Advisor, they have access to the best and the brightest minds within our government and really within the world about how we might approach this in a way that can help to achieve what they say they want, and that is a just and durable peace. Now, I think the question on the table is whether Secretary Rubio, whether the National Security Advisor, whether the White House is going to listen to those experts, or whether they are going to follow the I think perhaps ill-informed inclinations of those who sit at the top of this pyramid. Ali, there's a fundamental principle in diplomacy. We cannot want an outcome more than the other side does. My concern here is that President Trump, who fancies himself as a deal maker and as a peacemaker, wants to make a deal much more so than President Putin is ready to make a deal. And that, I think, will lead to some rushed conversations. It will lead to some ill-advised conclusions. And it could lead to a peace that is neither just, it is not durable, and is ultimately not in the interest of Ukraine or Europe, but profoundly in the interest of Vladimir Putin. That would not be good for Ukraine. It would not be good for Europe. And ultimately, Ali, that would not be good for the United States.
And I do think it's important for us to point out that if past is prologue, it is President Trump, despite the fact that his highest level officials are sitting at that table with their Russian counterparts. It is President Trump who's ultimately calling the shots here. Ned Price, thanks for joining us.